What's the one story you've been dying to tell, but no one ever asked? Story 1. I once ordered 2 plastic earring holders from a Chinese seller on eBay. They were around $2 each plus a few dollars for shipping. No big deal. A couple of weeks later, they were delivered. There was a square-shaped package that held my holders, packed with styrofoam, all fine and dandy, and about 8 other packages that came with it, all with the same shipping information from the same person or company. I didn't know what to do with them. I certainly didn't order them, but curiosity got the best of me, so I opened them. It turned out to be about 15 burlap pillow covers with various pictures on them. Skulls, flowers, Marilyn Monroe, Rolling Stones' lips, Totoro, deer, a lot of variety, a couple of duplicates. I was confused, like, what are these? I wasn't sure what to do with them, so I thought maybe I'd just hold on to them for a few days before contacting the seller and possibly shipping them back. And then 2 days later, more packages arrived. This time around, there were 5 or 6 packages of pillow covers, as well as 2 random costume masks. Now I was seriously confused. I had like 30 pillow covers and started wondering if they messed up an order or if I was receiving packages meant for someone else. But they didn't even sell these on their eBay, so I couldn't figure out what was going on. I contacted the seller, sent them pictures, and they were just as confused. They had no idea where the items came from, but they never asked me to send them back. I ended up selling them on Facebook for $5 each, made around $130. Story 2. My grandfather has a mysterious scar on the top of his arm. He knew my grandmother growing up, and she said he didn't have it when he went into the army, but had it when he returned. I grew up constantly asking him how he got the scar. The rest of the family liked to make up wild stories about it. Maybe he was bitten by a shark while surfing, got into a bar fight and was stabbed, or was attacked by a bear. About 10 years ago, I brought it up again and jokingly asked him to at least put the truth in his will. He got incredibly upset and suddenly blurted out, "Her husband unexpectedly came home, and I didn't realize the glass sliding door was closed." Edit. I didn't expect this to get so much attention. Sorry for the confusion earlier. I guess that's what happens when you answer questions late at night. My grandfather knew my grandmother when they were young, long before they were married. She was 13 when he left to join the army, and he was 18. He left without the scar and returned 4 years later with it, refusing to ever explain how it happened. They were married shortly after he came back in the late 1950s. As I understood it, the implication was that while he was away in the army, he was spending time with another woman and didn't realize her husband would be coming home. When the husband unexpectedly returned, my grandfather tried to escape and jumped through what he thought was an open glass door or window, shattering the glass. I'm not entirely sure if he knew she was married or if that part was a surprise too. He only ever said that one sentence and has never spoken about it since. I've always wondered how that woman explained the broken glass and the scene to her husband. Story 3. When I was in the 4th grade, my teacher made all the students create a poster about conservation. Naturally, I went to the library, typed in conservation, and picked a random topic that matched the theme, that just so happened to be surface mining or strip mining. I worked on the poster for a couple of days, and when I finished, I thought, wow, I did a great job on this poster. I went downstairs to show my parents my awesome conservation poster about how surface mining was bad for the environment and needed to stop. Instead of praise, which was what I was expecting, I got silence from my mother and the angriest glare I have ever seen from my father. He exploded, yelling about how surface mining isn't bad and asking how I could make a poster like that. Turns out my dad was a surface miner, and I didn't know it. Story 4. This happened a few years ago while I was in college and working at the bookstore on campus. I had just come back to work after surgery on my right arm. I broke it while riding my bike to school. I know. It doesn't get much cooler than that. So my arm was in a sling, and this person came up wanting to know where he could find all the Shakespeare books. I was like, all right, cool. They're over here. We walked over to the section, and he looked at my arm and asked what happened. I told him I broke it and had surgery recently. Then he asked if he could pray for my arm. In my mind, I'm thinking, that's a weird question, but I guess he'll go home and pray for my arm. Cool, whatever. Nope. He grabbed my left, non-broken hand and started praying. Loudly, saying things like, "Dear Jesus, please let this arm be healed tomorrow. and other similar phrases. He prayed for several minutes out loud while holding my hand, and I just sort of stood there waiting for it to be over. Also worth noting, he was probably 6 feet tall, and I'm about 5 feet 2 inches, so the hand he was holding was basically in the air. He finished his prayer and told me, "I wouldn't be surprised if you feel completely healed by tomorrow morning." I was like, "Dude, that's so neat that you think that. But I've got about 8 screws and 2 metal plates that are saying otherwise." Also, he didn't buy any of the Shakespeare books. Story 5. In 5th grade, they took our class to a wilderness camp for an entire 7 days, and my best friend at the time and I decided to make a bet for fun. Whoever used the bathroom for number 2 first lost. We were allowed to use the bathroom for regular breaks and showers, obviously, but no using it for anything else. The bus ride was almost 6 hours long, and I was starving. So I stuffed myself with food on the first day and basically fasted the next couple of days. By the 4th day, I was done. He decided to keep going just for laughs. We had these really nice log cabins, and the bathrooms were actually really clean. On the morning of the 7th day, he woke me up and told me that he was finally going to use it. I was laughing so hard at the thought of it. He came out of the bathroom about 10 minutes later and told me to look inside. His mess was literally so long that it nearly stuck out of the toilet and was dragging outside of the water. He actually couldn't physically flush it, so he left it there. Our counselor found it later that day and spent the entire afternoon trying to figure out which student could possibly have created that. No one ever found out. Story 6. I used to occasionally drive through a pretty empty stretch of desert for work. It was about 3 hours or so of near emptiness and no gas stations. I'd probably see 2, maybe 3 cars during the entire drive. The road passed through a couple of very tiny and mostly empty towns, but was generally far from anywhere. On one trip, I was making my way along the old 2-lane road and had just crested a hill when I saw a lone figure at the bottom, walking slowly up the hill along the side of the road. Being the desert, there was a long stretch of straight road ahead, giving me time to observe the figure as I drew closer. The person appeared to be wearing a white robe and was hunched over. It quickly became clear that the figure was carrying something on their back. At the same time, I noticed a flash in my rearview mirror. Glancing up, I saw a car come speeding over the hill behind me. It was a large Cadillac, and it quickly darted into the opposite lane and flew past me down the hill. As I watched the car descend, I realized that the figure at the bottom was dragging a long piece of wood behind them, resting part of it on their shoulder. It looked like a large wooden cross. The car finally reached the figure and came to a screeching halt in the middle of the road while I continued to slowly close the distance. At that point, the figure turned, revealing a short beard, and lifted the wooden cross off the ground and onto their back. He moved as quickly as possible across the road, long brown hair trailing in the breeze, and reached the car just as the trunk popped open. The man tried to put the cross into the trunk, but it wouldn't fit. Giving up, he left the trunk lid open and jumped into the passenger seat. The car sped off, slid into the dirt, spun around, and bounced back onto the pavement in a cloud of dust. As the dust settled, the car lurched forward and raced back up the hill, like it was on a mission. As it passed my car, I noticed the driver wearing shiny aviator sunglasses, steering coolly with one hand while leaning back in the seat. The passenger had his head out the window, staring at me as they drove off into the distance. They quickly reached the top of the hill and disappeared, with the cross still hanging out of the trunk, bouncing against the bumper. I stared into the mirror for a moment, half expecting them to return, before I realized I wasn't paying attention and resumed driving. I've seen a lot of strange things in the desert, but that was one of the weirdest. Story 7. I have 2 kids, a son, at the time 2, and a daughter, at the time almost 3. My daughter was in the middle of toilet training, and it wasn't going very well. I was sitting at my computer in the middle of an online game when my son came up and told me that my daughter had gone number 2. I was about 30 seconds from finishing the game, so I told him I'd take care of it in a second. He waited patiently. I finished the game, turned to look at him, and he proceeded to hold the poop out to me and said, "Look, she went." My daughter was standing right behind him, so in complete shock I asked her if she had done it. She replied, "Yup," and then I asked if that was it. Also, yup. Without thinking, I grabbed it, opened the back door, and threw it full force. It hit the fence hard, but not before my Samya decided this must be a game of fetch. During the chaos that followed, my son suddenly decided that it was yucky and proceeded to rub his hands down as much of our leather couch as he could reach. My wife walked in to see our son with dirty hands destroying the couch, the dog eating what was left by the fence, me gagging at the unbelievable mess under my fingernails, and my daughter hunched over yelling at me to wipe her. To this day, I'm not sure why she still trusts me to take care of them alone. Story 8. When I was little, I was scared of fruit. My mom would put fruit in my lunchbox every day and would get upset with me if I didn't eat it. Because, vitamins and all. So every day I would hide it somewhere. Sometimes I'd throw it out on the way to school or toss it into a street bin. My teachers couldn't know I wasn't eating my fruit either. They would tell on me. One day I forgot to throw out my banana before class. Snack time rolled around and I thought, oh no, I can't eat this. So what did I do? I quickly put the banana in a drawer under my desk, and I left it there. For weeks. I knew that fruit rots after a while. I was so scared of opening my drawer and dealing with the consequences that I just didn't, for literal weeks. It smelled awful, but I thought no one noticed. A month or two later, I decided to take a peek just to see what it looked like. I opened my drawer and there was nothing left but one big black stain in the red plastic. I genuinely thought I had left that banana so long that it completely decomposed. I now realize a teacher or janitor probably cleaned the drawer when they noticed the smell. But for years, I was convinced I had made a banana vanish. Story 9. I was driving home from work on a really cold night. I was pulling up to a stoplight, 2 lanes, and I was a few cars behind. The light turned green, and one of the first cars in the right lane wasn't moving. It was the end of the day. Everyone was cranky and honking, just maneuvering around him. As I passed by, I saw it was an older gentleman, just sitting there staring straight ahead, both hands on the wheel. It didn't seem right, so I found a place to turn around and got behind him with my car. I walked up and asked if he was all right. The poor guy was basically in tears and said his car had stalled. At that point, maybe 3 or 4 other people pulled over, and I explained the situation to them. We all jumped into action. I put him in my warm car, and we pushed his vehicle into an empty parking lot. I left a note on the window explaining what happened and included the number of the man's son, which he gave me and mine just in case. I gave him a ride home. We got to talking, and he told me he knew he shouldn't have gone out, but his sick wife just wanted ice cream, and he wanted to get it for her. Just such a lovely man trying to do something kind for his wife. Story 10. One time I was riding in the passenger seat with my then boyfriend when I suddenly got a horrible feeling. I knew something bad was about to happen, but I didn't want to tell him because I didn't want to freak him out or have him think I was being dramatic. Back then, I never wore my seatbelt in the passenger seat, but I felt an overwhelming urge to put it on. I tried to resist because I didn't want him to notice and ask questions, but I couldn't fight the urge, so I quietly buckled up. About 30 seconds later, we hit a deer head-on. It went flying into someone's yard and likely died instantly. The car was totaled. I freaked out and literally took off running after he pulled over. I was shaking and nauseous. I never believed in that kind of intuition until that day. My ex later told me he heard me put the seatbelt on and slowed down from about 50 miles per hour to around 40 because he thought I was nervous about his driving, which I wasn't. Sometimes I wonder if I hadn't put that seatbelt on and he hadn't slowed down, if the deer would have gone through the windshield. Story 11. When I was about 8 years old, I went with my parents to their friend's house for dinner. Their children were all a bit older than me, so I had no one to play with. They lived in a semi-rural area, and I was obsessed with horses. So I convinced my parents to let me walk about 200 meters down the road to where a few horses were grazing. I was standing on the roadside of the fence, feeding the horses, when a red sports car pulled up at high speed next to me. A shirtless man jumped out of the passenger side and started walking very fast toward me without saying anything. I can't tell you what his face looked like, because the moment that car door opened, something inside me just screamed, "Run." I sprinted, probably the fastest I ever had, back to the house and never once looked back. I never told my parents about it, but it's been 20 years, and the thought of what could have happened still haunts me. Every time I hear about a girl going missing or a body being found somewhere, my stomach turns. I'm 99% sure that would have been my fate. Story 12. I had a stalker during high school. She saw some pictures of me on social media and decided I was her new boyfriend, even though we had never met in person and only texted for about 2 days. She would skip school just to be in front of my school as soon as I finished class. One day, she somehow got my phone number, I still don't know how, and began calling me nonstop. I had to turn off my phone during a class trip because it wouldn't stop ringing. The next morning, I had about 100 missed calls. My classmates thought it was hilarious. When she found out my address, I'd had enough and called her. She cried hysterically and threatened to harm herself. Then she sent me a video of herself sitting on her window frame, saying her life didn't make sense without me and that she would end it. She then jumped, but she lived on the first floor, so it was like 2 meters, about 6.5 feet, and she pretended to be unconscious. I asked her how she sent the video if she was no longer alive. She claimed to be the emergency doctor. I blocked her and ignored every attempt she made to contact me. Even her friends reached out and told me we should get back together, even though we were never in a relationship. I changed my number and blocked her on every social platform. I never heard from her again. Story 13. This has happened several times throughout my life, and I've never heard of it happening to anyone else. I've dreamed about future events before they happened. The first time I clearly remember was in 2006, when I still lived with my parents. I was 17. I had a dream that I was sitting in a strange room with a door off to the side, and I didn't recognize anything about it. It stuck with me because it felt so out of place. A year later, I was sitting in the living room of my apartment and looked over. The layout matched the dream exactly. It was the library door in the living room of the apartment I had moved into 8 months earlier. I had never seen that place before the dream. The next time was last year. I had a dream I was sitting at a desk, reading paperwork that had some writing in Chinese. Again, I didn't recognize the place or the content. Last week, I realized I was at my desk at work, processing foreign purchase orders written, you guessed it, in Chinese. I've been at this job for 2 months now. Lastly, also about a year ago, I dreamed I was sitting in a kitchen at a dining table, next to a windowed door with cabinets on either side. I made a conscious effort to remember every detail. Turns out it was the kitchen of a new house my friend had just built. I've had a few more dreams recently, and if they come true, my life is about to change dramatically. Maybe it's just deja vu, but it's happened enough to really freak me out. Story 14. When I was 17, my friend's girlfriend needed to do a video project for college. Since we were the creative type, she asked us if we could help her with it and if we could use my dad's video camera. We had planned this really silly and ridiculous video involving 2 puppets we had, and we even made backdrops for it. The problem was, we didn't really have any kind of script, so the plan went nowhere after hours of prep. We ended up just drinking instead and figured we'd think of something later. I decided to mess around with the camera and film random things using the many built-in features. When I got home the next day, I reviewed the footage I had shot and thought it would make a pretty cool music video. So I sorted my music library by length to see what song I had that would roughly match the video's duration. D7 by the Wipers was just about right, and when I played the song over the footage, it fit amazingly well. I had to extend the final shot with a freeze frame to make it fit perfectly, but that was basically the only editing I did. Everything else was just me pressing record and stop and playing with the settings and filters. I thought it was pretty cool and have never really shared it with anyone outside my close friends. Story 15. My ex-boyfriend would constantly test how gullible I was. Sounds awful, but it was actually funny, and would occasionally lie about small, trivial things that didn't really affect me, just to make me look silly if I repeated them. When that happened, I'd immediately realize what was going on and rush over to his place to start a pillow fight to the death over the minor embarrassment. One day he asked me if I had ever been to a popular amusement park. Thinking this was my one and only chance to get back at him, I lied and said no, even though we had talked about my previous visits there. He got really excited and promised to take me on my birthday. I even involved my parents in the lie so they wouldn't slip up. On my birthday, we made the 3-hour drive down to the park and had a great time. I had to play dumb the whole trip, constantly asking, "What's that ride?" every 10 seconds and pretending not to have favorite rides, just to avoid revealing the truth. I planned to tell him on the way home. Then I figured I'd wait until our 1-year anniversary. Then I realized I was in too deep and decided I'd either tell him when we broke up or during our wedding vows. We broke up a few months ago after a few years together, but I never told him. I might tell him in 5 years, or never. But this is the most elaborate lie I've ever told, and it still eats away at me. Story 16. I've shared this story plenty of times in real life, but never online. Here comes a long one. I had just arrived in Hawaii for my first sea duty, Navy submarines, and was a lowly E4 in INDOC. INDOC is where you check in at support command, get cleared by medical and dental, assigned to barracks, and shown around base. I turned 21 less than a week after arriving, and the only people I knew were a few I had met in INDOC. They found out my birthday was coming up, and one guy insisted I shouldn't spend it alone in my barracks. It was a Monday, so we made plans to go out for dinner and a few drinks. That night, we got a ride downtown. I wasn't new to alcohol. I'd been drinking occasionally since I was 14 and heavily for 6 months or so. We started with Long Island's at dinner and headed out to a bar afterward. Things got fuzzy fast. One place had 5 pitchers of beer, and another gave us more Long Islands. I blacked out completely. There were a few hours of intoxicated chaos I only heard about later. I woke up the next morning on a porch, not the barracks, and didn't recognize the guy waking me up. He was wearing a Navy PT uniform and asked who I was and where I belonged. Next thing I knew, I was sitting on a couch in a foyer while he made calls. Then I was in a white government truck, getting yelled at by the chief who was driving. I spent the next few hours either being yelled at or waiting to be yelled at. At 9:15 a.m., I remember this part clearly, I was pulled into the Naval Submarine Support Command Master Chief's office and breathalyzed. I blew a 0.27, bars in Hawaii close at 4 a.m., so I hadn't had a drink in over 5 hours. I got chewed out for a while and was sent back to the INDOC office. Around 1 p.m., they sent me to lunch and told me to return at 2:30. I went back to the barracks, got less than 2 hours of sleep, and set about 20 alarms. When someone knocked, I immediately apologized, thinking I overslept. But the guy at my door said I wasn't late, just needed to get into uniform and shine my boots. I was going to speak to the Force Master Chief, senior enlisted for the entire Pacific submarine fleet. I was still drunk. When I got to his office, he started tearing into me. His first real question was, "Do you know who woke you up this morning?" I answered, "No." He told me the guy was the Admiral of Pearl Harbor Naval Base, the senior officer on the entire base. He didn't appreciate getting calls about sailors being messed up. He used stronger language. I knew I was in trouble. After chewing me out, the Force Master Chief finally said, "I expected you to be some disrespectful kid, but you seem like someone who made a mistake. Don't let it happen again," and he let me go. For the next couple days, I waited for my punishment. That Friday, INDOC had a program for new people to explore the island. I opted out to sleep. Then I got a phone call. "Pack your bags, you're flying to San Diego to meet your boat Saturday." I told the guy I just got an alcohol-related incident and probably couldn't go. He said he'd check and call back. 30 minutes later, he confirmed I was flying. I arrived at my boat during a weekend Liberty port, so not many people were around. Everyone I met said, "Oh, you're that guy." Apparently, anytime someone in the submarine force gets an ARI, a message goes to every boat. My entire command knew about me before I got there. For the next few years, every new sailor that showed up had heard my story. I became the "don't be that guy." I never got in real trouble because transferring from NSSC to my boat caused paperwork to get lost, but it did come back to haunt me later. That's a story for another time. Story 17. When I was 19, I worked at a place that offered Segway rides. It was a closed course with a guardrail on the outside, a loop on the inside of that, and an obstacle course in the center. Our training was simple. Riders had to go around the outer loop first to gain experience before they were allowed to try the obstacle course. While they rode around the outer loop, facilitators had to lightly hold on to the handles, mostly because riders, usually kids, would often do something reckless, and we needed to be able to react quickly. Well, on my first day, one kid wanted to ride by himself really badly. He was yelling and screaming at me to let him go. I tried to explain to the 10-year-old that I couldn't do that until he had more control. He didn't like that answer. He looked me dead in the face and shouted, "I want to ride by myself," then punched me square in the face. Naturally, I let go of the Segway to grab my glasses. The kid leaned forward to take off. Segways can reach up to 12 miles per hour, which feels really fast on such a small course. He immediately lost control and slammed into the guardrail, doing a full front flip over the handles and landing across the rail with his weight. The Segway crashed to the ground. The kid lay motionless on the rail. His mom and I ran over to check on him. He started crying, and his mom began yelling at him for punching me. I was a mess, thinking I was going to get fired on my first day. We pulled the security footage to show that I wasn't in the wrong. The mom took him to the hospital because he was having major side pain. Turns out he hit the guardrail hard enough to break a couple of ribs. She later emailed us an apology for her son's behavior. It was just an emotional day for everyone. Story 18. I may have a sixth sense when it comes to pregnancy. 2 separate times I dreamed that a woman was pregnant. Both times when I knew they weren't planning to be. The first woman was someone I used to babysit for. She had 2 daughters, one around 5 and an infant. I once asked her about having another baby, maybe a boy, and she said they wanted to wait at least 4 years between the kids because of college expenses. Then I had a dream she was pregnant, and just a couple of weeks later, she actually was. Her second 2 kids ended up being less than 2 years apart. The second woman was a friend's mom. She had kids young, so she had one child older than me and one slightly younger. I remember asking if she and her husband, who wasn't the father of the older kids, would ever have kids together. They said no. They felt they were too old. I had a dream she was pregnant, and sure enough, she was. That baby's probably in middle school now. Story 19. Almost a year ago, we took our dog to the vet because he stopped eating. His temperature was over 40 degrees Celsius, and a quick x-ray showed that one of his lungs was completely invisible. That meant it was filled with fluid. The vet told me to go straight to the animal hospital, no delays, because our dog was literally dying by the second. The first vet who handled his case was surprisingly indifferent. She was interested, but didn't seem to take the urgency seriously. I had to keep calling for updates instead of getting any calls myself. They drained a liter of fluid from his lung, but it kept filling back up daily. Until the fluid stopped, he couldn't leave the hospital. She eventually suggested surgery to implant drainage tubes, but nothing more proactive. The next vet took over and immediately recommended an MRI. He found a nodule in the lung. He suspected a bacterial infection that had grown out of control, causing fluid to build up as the body tried to fight it. They started antibiotics, but the nodule didn't shrink. He was more involved than the first vet, but still didn't have answers. Then came the third vet. He read through the entire file and invited me to help him monitor and investigate. He used his lunch breaks and extra time after hours to care for our dog. His involvement was comforting in a time when things felt hopeless. Eventually, he decided the only solution was surgery to remove the nodule. He was confident it wasn't cancer, just a bacterial issue. He showed me data from previous scans and compared it with real-time imaging. There had been no change. We decided to operate. We didn't have pet insurance, so the cost of this was entirely on us. And opening a dog's chest and operating on his lung isn't cheap. I had to decide if I was going to spend all my savings on a surgery that might not work. But he's my best friend, so I went for it. My fiancé and I spent the entire day of the surgery on the hospital floor with him. Just 3 days earlier, he had run up a mountain with me, with a liter of fluid in his lungs. He was still the same loving dog. When we left, we were promised a call once surgery began. That call never came. Instead, I got a call from the vet on his personal number. The first thing he said was, "I'm so sorry, it's cancer." He told me Muddy's last moments were painless and peaceful. I asked how certain he was. He said 95%. The nodule was hard and dark, typical of metastasized cancer. Even if we kept him alive, he'd only have 6 painful months, and treatment wouldn't be covered by insurance. My fiancée heard the call on speaker. I saw her crying. She had already given up. So had the vet who had worked so hard. I was being asked to choose between ending it or putting him through months of pain. I wouldn't even be able to say goodbye. He was the last connection I felt I had to my home country. Then something inside me screamed, "No." Not from desperation, something deeper. I told the vet to stitch him up and that I'd see him in the morning. I laid with him the next morning, crying. He took it all like the champ he is. We waited days for biopsy results. Time felt frozen. We couldn't focus on anything. We tried to go out but realized we had no money left. Each day at the hospital brought no change. Then one day, while we waited outside his room, the vet came around the corner and yelled, "It's not cancer." I lost control and sobbed into Muddy. The biopsy showed it was a granuloma. His immune system had walled off a bacterial infection, forming a hardened shell. The vet looked at me and said, "You saved your dog." That is incredible. We canceled our original summer vacation and went car camping through Norway so Muddy could spend 3 weeks drinking from streams, climbing mountains, and running free. He loved every second. I just finished paying off the loan for the surgery last month. It was worth every single penny. Story 20. Years ago, my temp agency sent me to a warehouse in the middle of nowhere. I was the only employee there at this linen wholesale place. The owner sent me in the back to wash and fold stuff, mostly chair covers. Turns out the linen business was just a front to fund what she was really doing in the warehouse. Her actual business was performing medical treatments on people. She had built a strange room in the back that confused me when I first explored the place. It had no lights, a sink, a toilet with pipes coming out of it, and an examination table like you'd see at a hospital. Things only got weirder from there. I started to notice that the owner was extremely unsanitary. She ate spoiled food from the refrigerator in the back and kept jars of dehydrated items filled with maggots on the counter. There was a strange smell coming from the front office. She had built a loft where she would sit in a giant egg-like enclosure and have clients do the same. She'd soak them in ozone, even putting tubes in their ears to spray it into their heads. This caused facial boils. I overheard her yelling at a client that the boils were normal at first. She'd have me clean the egg enclosure with a vinegar Windex solution, and the smell was unbearable. She also had something she called a coil machine. She claimed she could cure any illness by sending frequencies through people. They had to hold on to an electric coil. I was told not to go near the machines. She even got in contact with an Amish community and performed these experiments on them. She sounded surprised when someone named Jonas told her they didn't have a three-pronged outlet. The employee before me had actually been living in the warehouse. She offered me the same opportunity, which I politely declined. She even asked if I wanted to assist with treatments involving enemas on her clients. Again, I said no. I had only signed up to do warehouse work, but I ended up getting dragged into all sorts of bizarre requests. This is just the tip of the iceberg. That woman was absolutely out of her mind. Story 21. I know this story might sound unbelievable, but if you knew me and my two best friends who were there, you'd know we're not the type to make things up just to sound cool. I'll be the first to admit, it sounds wild, but it's true. When I was younger, I absolutely loved the band AFI. Every time they played in my area, or even in nearby states, I went. I don't think I missed a single show. So when they announced a concert in my city, my friends and I saved up as much money as we could in hopes of scoring VIP tickets. We pooled our money together for tickets, merch, food, and drinks. It was our thing. From all the past shows I'd been to, I made a super detailed scrapbook. It had everything. Warped tour moments, meet and greet photos, ticket stubs, handwritten notes about my favorite songs from each show. You name it. I put my heart and soul into it. Back to the new concert. Tickets were about to go on sale, but we didn't have enough for all three of us to go VIP. We decided to stick together, even if that meant none of us would get VIP access. We bought the best seats we could afford, and I came up with a desperate plan. Bring the scrapbook. I knew the band sometimes did informal meet and greets outside their tour bus if fans were willing to wait long enough. After the concert, I asked my friends if we could head toward the VIP area. They agreed. A bouncer saw us and rolled his eyes but didn't yell or kick us out. I asked if I could show him my scrapbook. Fast forward 20 minutes, and we had gathered a small crowd flipping through it, reminiscing about past shows. Somehow the band's guitarist Jade passed by and heard about it. He came over, started looking through my scrapbook, and after a few minutes asked, "Who made this?" I was starstruck and raised my hand. Thankfully, my friends jumped in to talk me up. How much effort I'd put into it, how many concerts I'd been to, how I always worked hard to make sure we could all go. Then Jade said, "Why don't you three come back with me? I'm sure Davey would love this thing." And that's how we ended up in the VIP area, getting experiences even better than the ones paid for. All thanks to my scrapbook and my love for that band. Story 22. I posted this before, but it got removed for violating a subreddit's rules. This is something that happened to me in NYC, and honestly, it defines New York for me. I was on a subway in Manhattan on my way to meet some college friends and needed to transfer trains. Because of construction, I had to exit the station and walk a few blocks to another stop. I guess I have a friendly face, because strangers always pick me out of a crowd to ask for directions or start conversations. It happens constantly, and my friends find it hilarious. Anyway, as I exited the station and started walking, a beautiful European woman approached me asking for help finding her train. Turns out we were headed the same way, so I told her to follow me. I wasn't familiar with that neighborhood, so I stopped to ask a young guy for directions. He confirmed we were headed the right way and said he'd tag along. Now it was the three of us walking together. We made small talk, and then the guy got a phone call and lagged behind. Suddenly, we heard a loud smack. I turned around and saw the guy lying on the ground, with a large, angry man standing over him, yelling something like, "I said don't bump into me." I'm not a big guy, average height, slim, but I have a deep voice. I walked up to the man and said firmly, "You're going to keep walking now." He stopped yelling, then ran off. Everything was chaos. The guy who helped us was lying there like a cartoon character, slowly regaining consciousness. The European woman was clutching my arm, terrified and babbling. Out of nowhere, a guy with a thick accent rode up on a bike and yelled, "Where did the bad guy go?" I pointed in the general direction, and he shouted, "I'll get him," before riding off like some action hero, never to return. I knelt next to the man on the ground who was begging me not to leave him. He was scared and confused. I gave him water and called the police from his phone. I also called his brother, who lived nearby. A few minutes later, his brother showed up, very animated, jumping and yelling dramatically, clearly upset but also very flamboyant. Meanwhile, the European woman still hadn't let go of my arm. She had no idea where to go anymore. The police arrived and asked me to give a report. The brother was yelling, asking who I was, as if I had caused the whole thing. While all of this was happening, a random girl ran up, recording herself with her phone, and asked me if I was Joe Jonas. I was like, "No, not now, I'm a little busy." After the situation calmed down, I walked the woman to her stop. All of this happened just because someone asked me for directions. I ended up getting to the bar really late. When my friends asked if I got lost, I just said, "I need a drink." I got wasted that night, and I'm pretty sure the police called me later for a final report. Only the universe knows what I said in that call after a few drinks. Story 23. I've always wanted to tell people the story of when I got asked to come on stage at Warped Tour and play with Billy Joe of Green Day. When I was a kid, I used to play a lot of Guitar Hero. Like a lot. I could get through about 75% of Through the Fire and the Flames before failing on one particular solo. I could play The Devil Went Down to Georgia on practice mode at 88%. It's not superhuman, but I played an incredible amount. My brother once saw me play and told me, "You know, if you practiced on your real guitar half as much as you play the fake one, you'd be really good." Fast forward 5 years. I somehow managed to score front row tickets to see Green Day with my old best friend. I was a kid in the early 2000s. Green Day was the band. I was absolutely losing my mind watching them play. Nice Guys finished last. Redundant. Minority. It was amazing. About 2/3 of the way through the set, Billy Joe asked the crowd if anyone knew how to play Warning. I had taken my brother's advice to heart and had been practicing real guitar for a long time. I actually knew how to play the song, but I didn't think I'd be chosen. I was screaming and jumping, and an angel must have been watching over me because 2 bouncers grabbed me and pulled me over the railing. They led me around the stage to the stairs and gave me a full pat down, like hands in pockets level, which makes sense. Then they gave me a pep talk. I don't remember a word of it because Billy Joe was standing right there, 15 feet away. He waved, the bouncers gave me a nudge, and I started walking. More like floating. Billy leaned down, handed me his personal guitar and said, "Don't let this moment distract you from the fact that in 1998, The Undertaker threw mankind off Hell in a Cell, and he plummeted 16 feet through an announcer's table." Story 24. A friend and I almost didn't make it out alive while diving. While in the military, a friend and I got certified for recreational diving. We had only been diving about 6 times when we decided to dive at Gun Beach. When we arrived, the water looked rough. A guy sitting on the beach warned us that the tide was coming in and told us to be careful. That should have been a red flag. Guam is surrounded by coral reefs, so coral is right off the beach and you have to cross it when going out. It's dangerous and sharp. We found a cutout and followed it down. Right away, the water was rough, and it was hard to stay in one place. I remembered how calm the ocean usually gets once you go deeper, so I kept following the channel. A minute later, my friend tugged on my fin and pointed at the depth. It was 120 feet. We were only certified to 60 feet, and I had never gone deeper than 80. We broke off and started ascending, swimming parallel to the shore. It was extremely hard to control ourselves with the current pushing us 20 to 25 feet back and forth. We decided to head back because it was just too dangerous. We tried swimming toward the cutout in the coral to get back to shore, but we unknowingly passed it. My friend realized it too late, and we couldn't find our way back. We were running low on air and decided to surface to regroup. That's when we got caught in a rip current. It started ripping the regulators from our mouths and throwing us into the coral. Occasionally, the current would push us back to the surface just long enough to catch a breath and shove the regulators back in. By the fourth or fifth time, I could barely breathe before the regulator was torn from my face again, and I was slammed into coral. I was terrified. I accepted I might not make it. Then I surfaced one more time and heard my friend yell, "BCD!" At first, I didn't understand. Then instinct kicked in, and I pulled the inflation cord on my BCD. Thankfully, we had just enough air left to inflate our vests and float to the surface. We rolled onto our backs, and the waves pushed us back to the beach. When we stood up, the guy who warned us earlier said he was about to call the police because he thought we were done for. A whole crowd had gathered from the beach bar. It was, without question, the most terrifying moment of my life. Story 25. When I was about 14, my parents left me in the car while they went into a store to do the weekly shopping. The only problem was they locked the car and took the keys with them. I was sitting in the back with my headphones on when, all of a sudden, the car alarm started blaring and people began staring. I had no way to contact my parents, so I rolled down the back window and climbed out, right in the middle of the parking lot. I walked around the store looking for them, but couldn't find them, so I returned to the car. After a while, the alarm stopped. I figured I should get back in the same way I got out, through the back window. As I was halfway through, trying to climb in, the alarm started going off again. Suddenly, a random guy came over, grabbed my legs, and started yelling at me like, "Hey, hey, stop breaking into that car!" I was completely confused and panicked, so I pulled myself inside and rolled the window up. I sat there in the back seat, staring at him, not knowing what to do. Eventually, my parents came out of the store to find a man yelling at their car, the alarm blaring, and their confused 14-year-old kid looking totally stunned in the back seat. Story 26. I was dating this girl a few years back, and we both had distinct dreams about each other on the same exact night. What made it eerie was that her dream was the continuation of mine. The story lined up almost perfectly. In my dream, we had gone out to eat at a small restaurant. She left to go to the bathroom while I went out to my car to get something. I came back inside and waited, but she never returned. After a while, I asked a female waitress to check the stalls in the restroom. She came back and told me it was completely empty. I had this overwhelming feeling that she had been taken. My dream ended with me speeding off in my car to find her. Her dream started with her in the back of a car after being taken. She didn't remember how she got there, but she was terrified. A co-worker of ours was driving, and his girlfriend was in the passenger seat. After a few minutes, he parked in view of a bridge and said something ominous, suggesting I would soon be dead. In my dream, I had crossed a bridge during the search, and it collapsed, with me falling. What baffled me was that both dreams happened the same night. Hers picked up right where mine ended. I genuinely believe our minds are more connected than we realize. Experiences like this make me convinced of it. Story 27. On the first day of Ramadan last year, I decided to sit out on my balcony to relax. After a while, I saw my cat behind the glass and decided to go back inside, but the sliding door wouldn't budge. The safety bar had tipped over, and I didn't realize it. And of course, I had left my phone inside. I live on the second floor, and I was stuck out there for hours, yelling down at passersby to ask if they could call emergency maintenance. One guy actually did, and maintenance eventually showed up. I tried explaining the situation from my balcony, but I think they misunderstood me because they left. So I went back to yelling. Hours passed. It was midnight, I had been fasting all day, and I was starving. Then two guys who looked like they walked out of a gangster movie saw me. One of them yelled, "Hold on, princess," and ran off. A few minutes later, he returned with a ladder. I thought he was trying to help me down, But instead, he propped the ladder against my bedroom window, left of the balcony. He didn't place it well and actually fell off the ladder. But he brushed himself off, climbed back up, and used his weight to push the ladder back and break my bedroom window. He climbed in and opened the balcony door from the inside. I was shaken and tried to offer him money for the help, but he refused and left with his friend. Residents had been watching the whole thing, and someone called the police, thinking I was getting kidnapped. I didn't know this, so when I heard a knock on the door, I assumed it was a concerned neighbor. Instead, I opened the door to a police officer pointing a gun at me. By the look on their face, I'm surprised there wasn't an accidental reaction. I was so mentally drained that I didn't even flinch. The officers pushed past me to check the apartment, assuming the kidnappers were still there. Then they apologized and left. I didn't eat that night. I just slept in the living room and cleaned up broken glass the next morning. Story 28. I helped a high school kid who was having a seizure during a basketball game. My mom has frequent seizures, so I immediately recognized what was happening when I saw two of his friends dragging him out of the bathroom as he flailed. They were frozen in fear and just laid him on the tile floor while he thrashed. I ran over and started giving directions. One kid tried to hold him down, but I made him stop. Seizures usually just need to run their course. I placed my jacket under the kid's head to stop it from hitting the floor and gently petted his hair while telling him it would be okay. I told his friends to run into the gym and get his parents. I asked if this had happened before, and they said yes, all the time. So I told them not to call 911 just yet. It could be an unnecessary bill, and I wanted his parents to decide. He threw up all over my jacket, but his parents rushed out and helped him. They were so appreciative. The next day, they coincidentally showed up at the restaurant where my husband works. They tipped him $100 to thank me because they didn't know my name. I was really proud of myself that day. I feel like I truly helped someone. I learned that even though I have anxiety and usually panic, I was able to stay calm when it mattered most. And I'm so glad that kid ended up okay. Story 29. Last year, my friends and I were trying to get the Criminal Mastermind achievement in GTA 5. Long story short, you have to complete all the heists on hard difficulty with the same team and no one can die. We were doing great until I messed up big time. I don't remember the exact heist, but I think we had to clear out a building, maybe a hangar or warehouse, full of enemies. During the drive to the location, enemy helicopters spawned, and I was the designated anti-air. As the helicopters closed in, I jumped out of the car to shoot them down with a homing rocket launcher. The driver angled the car to block shots from the building while I locked onto the first helicopter. I fired the missile slightly under it, but the missile was going too fast. It curved upward, past the helicopter, and came right back at me. I said two words that my friends and I still quote to this day. Oh no! Of course, the missile hit me, and all of us died in the explosion. It was a massive failure. I don't know if we were crying from frustration or laughing at how absurd it was. From that moment on, they gave me the nickname Criminally Undermined. I've got more funny stories from video games, but this one stands out as a classic. Story 30. One time during a strange winter in Florida, it snowed. My neighbors and I usually walk to school together, but instead of walking home that day, we decided to go to their aunt's house. I'd heard about her, but had never been to her home. We knocked, but no one answered. The door was unlocked, so we went in. It was freezing inside and we couldn't figure out how to turn the heat on. Then someone suggested it might be warmer under the house. Since it was built on cinder blocks, there was just enough room to crawl underneath. Under the house, we found a couple of old mattresses. Despite the cold, it had been a pretty dry year, so everything was flammable. Someone suggested we light the mattresses on fire to warm up, kind of like an igloo, I guess. We were dumb kids, so I agreed. We found a couple of lighters and set the mattresses on fire. It went up instantly, like we'd soaked them in gasoline. The fire spread and caught the underside of the house. We ran as fast as we could. The fire department showed up almost immediately. The entire floor was destroyed. Turns out it wasn't even their aunt's house. It was the one next door. We never told anyone. I think I might have committed arson. Story 31. I work night shifts and usually don't go to sleep until 8 a.m. The week leading up to this game, I worked about 60 hours and was completely drained. I really just wanted to relax and have a drink. I've been a Jaguar season ticket holder for years. It's more of a family tradition at this point. Sunday morning, I got home from work and didn't sleep because I couldn't. I was too excited about finally having a day off. At about 9:30, I picked up my dad, and we usually grab a six-pack of beer before tailgating with friends and family. I told him that morning, either get me two six-packs or something stronger. I have half a bottle of rum, and I'll drink it all if I have to. My dad gave in. I was 20 at the time, and we bought two six-packs of Bud Light Platinum. 6%. My dad and I love it. Fast forward to the tailgate. I was 5 beers in within 20 minutes. Over the next hour and a half, I drank 10 beers total. I was definitely drunk. I got to my seat and was there for kickoff, though I don't remember it. At some point, I had to use the bathroom. What started as a quick break turned into sitting down, and because I hadn't slept yet, falling asleep, I was out for almost an hour. Thankfully, I wasn't sitting with family, or they would have gone looking for me. Eventually, I woke up, realized where I was, got up, and returned to my seat. I don't remember much until about the fourth quarter. As I walked back to the car, I noticed an itch. That's when I realized I had fallen asleep in the bathroom and never wiped. I had pulled my pants up and walked around all day without even realizing it. I was still drunk and exhausted. When I reached the car, I pushed the seat back and passed out for another 4 hours. When I woke up, I was still partially intoxicated, but decided to drive home slowly. Once I got there, the state of my white pants confirmed everything. I showered, threw the clothes into the wash with triple detergent, knowing they couldn't be saved, and passed out for another 4 hours. Moral of the story: don't get extremely drunk while sleep deprived and try to use the bathroom. You will fall asleep and forget to wipe. Story 32. The first time my family and I went on a real vacation, I got sick on the last day. I spent the whole morning nauseous, took a shower, and got even worse. I tried to fight it off, hoping it would pass. When we went to breakfast, I ordered pancakes and lemonade. I only ate half before giving up. As we were leaving, a waitress brought out a steaming plate full of bell peppers. The smell hit me like a truck, and I ran outside and threw up everywhere, just 10 feet from a trash can. I felt okay afterward, so we went to visit family one last time. They mentioned the carnitas my aunt made the night before, and I immediately turned gray. I ended up throwing up 3 more times in their bathroom. Then came the drive home. I threw up 14 more times on the side of the road. My back and shoulders were sore for an entire week. I couldn't eat anything but plain mashed potatoes and sourdough bread for days. I had no other symptoms of illness, and no one else who ate with me got sick. We make that same trip every year, and without fail, someone always asks me if I'm going to have another episode. Story 33. Years ago, some friends and I went out for a night of partying. We ended up crashing at my mate's girlfriend's house. Her parents' house, actually. I wasn't feeling well in the middle of the night due to too much drinking. The house was dark, and I was still drunk and disoriented. I found a room and started to vomit. That's when I realized I had thrown up all over their dog, who had been peacefully sleeping in its bed. I was too drunk and sick to clean it up. Somehow I managed to get back to the bedroom I was staying in and passed out. I woke up late the next day with a horrible hangover, trying to piece together what had happened. When I got to the kitchen, I learned that the girl's teenage brother, who had also been out the night before, had been blamed for the mess. They had even shaved off a large amount of the dog's hair. I'm fairly sure my friend and his girlfriend suspected me, but I never admitted to it or brought it up again. Story 34. I'm a prosthetist. I make prosthetic limbs. Many of my patients have mobility issues and can't easily get to the office, so we offer house calls. Most homes are normal and clean, but over the years I've seen some seriously disturbing things. I visited houses that resembled something from a hoarder reality show, if not worse. I've seen patients who had soiled themselves and were lying in it all night with no intention of cleaning up. But the worst situation I ever encountered was with a woman who weighed around 400 pounds. I visited her home after she had become bedbound due to losing a leg. She had moved a hot plate onto a table next to her bed and had been cooking there for several weeks without ever getting up. I knelt next to her bed to grab something from my bag, and I felt my knee get wet. That's when it hit me. I had knelt on grease-soaked carpet. The entire area around her bed was stained. I quickly finished my assessment and left. I got into my car, took off my pants, and threw them out the window. When I got home, I immediately showered. The grease had soaked through the bottom of my bag, so I had to throw that away too. Story 35. Okay, so I've genuinely been waiting for a question like this because It's something I've always wanted to tell someone, but I know I'd be way too embarrassed to bring it up otherwise. So here goes. I've moved schools relatively often. At one of my old schools, there was this girl I had a bit of a crush on. Nothing major. I wasn't going to fall on my knees and declare my eternal love for her, but it was a crush nonetheless. I knew I didn't stand a chance, not even remotely. So I kept everything to myself. I spent a few years at that school and got to know her enough to talk to her normally, maybe even be casual friends. She didn't mind chatting with me or hanging out when we had classes together, and honestly, I was more than happy with that. An occasional smile, a simple nod, it felt like enough. But then came my last day at that school. I wanted to tell her how I felt somehow, without revealing my identity. I didn't want her to know it was me, but I still wanted her to know someone out there thought she was amazing. So I did something old-fashioned. I wrote her a letter. In the letter, I told her that I liked her, that I thought she was beautiful, kind, and just all around incredible, but I didn't sign it. I didn't even write "From your secret admirer." I just left it blank. I slipped the letter into her locker when no one was looking, and that was it. I left that school forever. To this day, I have no idea how she reacted. Did she like it? Find it weird? Did it make her smile? Did she even see it? Did she think it was from someone else? I'll never know, but I hope, at the very least, it made her feel special, even just for a moment. Story 36. I was heading over to my friend's new apartment to play D&D. It's a few miles away, so Google Maps told me the best route was to take the freeway. As I got onto the freeway, I noticed a lot of black smoke. On the opposite side, there was a car completely engulfed in flames from what looked like a really bad accident. As I got closer, I saw two guys rushing toward another wrecked car that was beginning to smoke. I guess my instincts kicked in, because I pulled over and ran toward the car too. Inside was a woman, panicking and desperately trying to get out. The three of us grabbed the door and pulled with everything we had. We managed to pry it open and drag her out, just in time. 20 seconds later, the entire car was engulfed in flames. About 2 minutes later, paramedics arrived and took care of her. Luckily, no one was seriously hurt, but it was terrifying to think how close it came. After all that, I still went to play D&D, with adrenaline pumping through me like crazy. Story 37. I already shared a story, but I remembered another one that I really love. Back in primary school, we had book week, where everyone got to dress up as their favorite character from any book. My family didn't have much money, and I didn't have a way to make or buy a costume, so every day that week, I just came in wearing my school uniform. One day, we had an assembly where the best costumes got to go up in front of the whole school and say who they were. During the assembly, they asked everyone to raise their hand if they wanted to show off their costume. Even though I was just in my uniform, I raised my hand, and for some reason, they picked me. I think I raised my hand because I was jealous and just wanted some attention, but I had no plan for what I'd say when it was my turn. After all the other kids proudly announced their characters and got applause, it was my turn. The teacher handed me the mic and asked who I was dressed as. I panicked and blurted out, I'm Anne from the famous Five, but in her school uniform. Dead silence. No applause. I was so embarrassed that I started crying and had to get my mom to pick me up early. When we got home and I told her what happened, she had to hold back her laughter. Now that I'm older, I look back and just wonder, what on earth was going through my head? Story 38. I was downtown in Orlando, Florida, out clubbing with a friend. She got way too drunk and ended up getting kicked out, so I left with her to make sure she was okay. We sat on the sidewalk just waiting for the party bus to take us back. We were sobering up, people watching, and passing time. I could go on about the things we saw that night, but the most unforgettable moment was this group of 5 or 6 guys and one very upset girlfriend. You could tell she and the guy leading the group were in the middle of a fight. He was walking ahead looking fed up while she followed him, yelling and pleading. As they got to an intersection, he suddenly shoved her hard into the street. It wasn't an accidental bump. He fully threw her down. He just kept walking, and his friends laughed and followed him, leaving her on the ground. I don't know what came over me, but I got up and walked toward them. I had no plan and no concern for myself, just a gut instinct to do something. Fortunately, the group kept walking, or I probably would have been jumped. One of the guys had stayed behind to help her up. I walked straight to her and asked if she was okay, and if she wanted me to get her away from them. The guy with her tried to speak up, saying she was fine, but I looked him straight in the eye and told him I wasn't talking to him. Then I asked her again,